Hello and welcome to the Emergent podcast, brought to you by Emergent Software. Today we have a super exciting episode. We're going to dive headfirst into the wonderful world of Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is an amazingly powerful resource for companies, and the truth of it is that most companies aren't using all of the functionality that they could to be as efficient as they could. And so we have invited on an awesome guest, Jeremy Brewer. He has worked at Emergent Software for the past 3 years. He is an Azure architect, and what Jeremy loves to do is design solutions with customers to help them modernize their environments. Hey, Jeremy, thanks for coming on with us. I appreciate it. Can you just give us a quick introduction about you, some of your hobbies, and then we'll jump right into how people can improve their work life with Microsoft Teams?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me here, Derek. I appreciate it. As you mentioned before, I'm an Azure architect. I've been working in this position a long time. I've been in the Microsoft ecosystem with partners for almost 20 years at this point. And so along the way, I try to keep some fun going on. I've got wonderful kids growing up here. We enjoy a lot of summertime in Minnesota when we can, just getting out on the boat and doing other fun stuff. But, when we're out working hard to help, as you said, modernize customers and bring that digital transformation.
Very cool. Very cool. What's your favorite water sport?
I might be a little bit too old for this, but I tried to pick up kneeboarding recently, and that's been a lot of fun. But I would probably say we're big into skiing, and I might try wakeboarding or something else maybe in the next year or two. But maybe we'll even look at potentially getting some jet skis. Who knows? It's got to get out on the lake and have a lot of fun.
That's very cool. Yeah, I never went boating growing up, and then I married into a big boating family, and so it was definitely a big initiation getting me out there behind the boat. And I've tried wake surfing. I'm not that good at it, but kneeboarding is definitely my speed. But yeah, every time I'm done, I'm like, man, I'm too old for this. My knees hurt. My body hurts.
But, yep. I'm going to keep doing it until I can't, but that might be sooner than I think.
That's good. That's good. Well, cool. Let's just jump right into it. So Microsoft Teams. So we were talking a little bit about what we could share with the wonderful people about all the functionalities of Microsoft Teams. And the coolest ones that I thought you talked about was how they're adding a walkie-talkie functionality. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, so I believe that's out now at this point. Push to talk at this point now is the iteration of, you remember a long time ago, there was those little Nextel phones with the button on it. You could chirp somebody else on the other end.
Right.
Teams now has that sort of same push to talk. So if you think about, when I thought about Teams initially, I thought about office workers having a chance to send a chat message or share a file. But Teams spans well beyond just people who are remote working or in a cube. It goes into field workers as well. Whether you're talking about remote sales staff, whether you're talking about nurses or people who are out on a construction site, and having the ability to have a joint place to collaborate together, being Teams on a mobile device or on a PC or a tablet, but then having that ability to push to talk with somebody quickly or a group of people quickly while collaborating in that type of environment is possible. And there's many manufacturers out there now that are Teams certified devices for push to talk that I think is probably not used very much, maybe just because it's not known as well. But even my Poly phone that I have at my desk here has push to talk on it. Which is great when you want those quick paging options. Hey, somebody's here to see you. Your guests from 2:30 are present right now. So if you have a secretary or somebody who's greeting people coming into an organization, they would have that ability.
Interesting. So because when I first heard about this, and that's cool to know that it's already out because I haven't tried it yet. When I first heard about it, it's like, oh, it's another way for people to just make sure you're at your desk and like, oh, I'll just ping them right now, right? And that way, they can't decline my call, right? Kind of a thing. But it makes sense that there's a lot more use cases for that than, just collaborating on a project. And it would be cool because it is super annoying to have to set up a meeting and set up a call. And when you just have like a 2-second question, right? So
right.
That'd be cool. I'm excited to try that.
Yeah, where I see it the most, it was probably my last example where we'll do a lot of transitions of organizations onto Teams Voice. And when they do that, they'll lose some of the functionality of their older Mitel systems, as an example. And that ability to push a button quick and just say, your 1030's here, now you have that capability back. And I think that's pretty neat.
Very cool. Microsoft seems to be at the forefront of AI with ChatGPT. What does Microsoft, make available in the way of AI with Microsoft Teams?
That's a big splash over the last couple of months. A couple of things that I would just mention that I think are a little bit different about how Microsoft's approaching using AI and ChatGPT is not necessarily the tech, but what they do with the data and how it's presented and secured. When you look at Copilot, which Copilot is a broader term than maybe necessarily just one software. So you can get Copilot in Teams, you can get Copilot on your desktop. There's a Copilot button now being added to all the Surface laptops. Copilot will go across the board in AI, and the difference on how they handle the corporate data and the people who are having conversations with it and sharing with it, trying to enhance emails and make sure things are clear and whatever else they're doing with it, is that Microsoft doesn't use your Copilot interactions to help train the model further. And so that data is enclaved into your tenant. This is your stuff. And so if you're using Copilot Bing Chat, for example, which is available, I believe, for everybody at this point, there's an enterprise version that ensures that, of course, nothing is getting transmitted out of it. All your customer data and yourself is safe.
For those who haven't ever used Copilot, what is Copilot for?
Yeah, so that's fine. Copilot and will be a little bit contextual depending on where you're using it. But I think the big thing that people are seeing right now with Copilot in Teams, Excel, Word, Copilot, as I mentioned, inside of Bing search engine, they're using it a lot of times to help look up information quickly, whether it's about your organization or some sort of limitation, or help me make sure that the customer sent me this email. Here's my reply. Does this make sense? Can you look through this and just make sure that I was clear when I was trying to convey this back to an end user? Those are going to be probably some of the most important pieces out of it. And what we will eventually see in Teams, as an example, will be what's called intelligent recap. So we'll take the transcript of your meeting, our conversation, for example. Now, if this was a Teams meeting and we're talking, grab that transcript, find all the action items in there, and then generate a summary out of that. And so we have people who we've relied on a lot for taking meeting notes and making sure everybody has their information.
Right.
And I think there's probably still some wisdom in doing that, but having it done for you when you're busy having the conversation, it's hard to also take notes and keep the pace going. And so it's nice to know that that will be taken care of there. Plus, as you're going through it, what if you forgot to write down that note? You forgot that action item. Well, it's nice to have it there in front of you.
That's really cool, because I know when I'm in meetings, it takes 100% of my attention to be engaged in the meeting and thinking about what they're saying. And then usually what happens is the last 10 minutes of a meeting are, okay, what did we just talk about? What are some action items? Yep. And so to have that recap, it would save a lot of time. Does that recap include things like, oh, these are some of the tasks you volunteered for?
Yeah, it'll summarize the entire meeting, create the notes for you. It will generate tasks as an example. So if I came and said, Derek's going to take care of calling the customer tomorrow, the task will be that information assigned to you. And it just makes the job of the project management a lot easier, having that recap there. And I think also, too, where a lot of the engineering staff, for example, in our organization, would be having one-to-one conversations with the engineering staff of our customers, or maybe with other stakeholders, having that consistent meeting note recap is fantastic. It really is going to be, the point of AI is to help, remove some of the human error out of our daily tasks, but also to free us up from having to do what we've done, where, yeah, maybe you just spent the last 10 minutes of that call recapping what you just talked about so that hopefully everybody remembers what's going on. Well, if that's done for you, you can either end the meeting early, or you have 10 more minutes of productivity that you could have gotten out of that, and let the robots handle it.
Right. Exactly. It's okay if you don't know this, but I know Microsoft has a little bit of a project management system built into Teams called Teams Planner. Or is it Microsoft Planner?
It's gone through a couple names, because there was a consumer version called To Do. And then there was tasks by planner. And so there was kind of a merging of that. And to be honest, the exact proper noun for it now, I'm not sure what it is, but I believe they still refer to it in Teams as planner.
Okay, gotcha. And I imagine that you could somehow sync the tasks that the recap
Yep.
makes with Planner, and then your day just gets planned for you.
Yep, that's the idea. And if you're running multiple different projects with multiple different customers, or just internally, even at your own organization, different projects, having that ability to group them, these tasks belong here. So if you're in a heavy meeting day, for example, and you're just generating tasks all day long, having that sorting for you is quite nice. So you can take a look at those and
Yeah.
prioritize your tasks from there.
So as you know, Emergent Software is a remote first employer, right? So I'm remote, you're remote. I'm not sure there's anyone who goes into an office. And so a big job of Microsoft Teams and programs like Slack or Google Chat, which is Google's, product, is maintaining that connection, right? We still want to feel like, oh, we're still collaborating. I still have coworkers, right? I, I'm not just on an island by myself. And I know that Microsoft Teams has come out with a product called, what is it? Immersive Spaces. Can you talk to
Yeah.
me about that and what that could do for remote work?
Yeah, immersive spaces is interesting, and what you have now that it's pretty hot off the press. So it just released. Immersive spaces is going to give people a little bit of that additional human element back, and it's a little cartoony, but I think there's a lot of fun to be had with it. So, for example, if you have a MetaQuest, you're able to use that to join teams and go into that space and be able to interact with your coworkers in a Teams meeting. You'll have your presented screen is up on the wall and in giant view, and you can move around the space, hand gestures, they can see your face, raise your hand if you want, that sort of stuff. And for the coworkers who don't have a head mounted display of some sort, you can use immersive space inside of Teams directly through a PC and just use your mouse to kind of look around. A little less connected, but then you're not feeling like you're being left out. And I think that these type of ways to bring people, so Emergent, right, for example, has people all across the US here now at this point, trying to feel connected in a way where, we would have potentially had in the office. This kind of bridges that gap just a little bit. So I think that this is a fun way to do this. Some customers will probably love it, others won't. Use it at your discretion in those circumstances, but you can have people mixed, just as a note. So when you create the meeting, you don't have to make a choice over, is this going to be an immersive space or not? They could choose to just watch the standard people in the diagram if they want to, but you might have other colleagues who would like a little bit more of an interactive story. I think that's pretty neat. One other little side note about the interactive spaces, it also does have a form of the Teams breakout rooms, where when you leave out of a certain part in the immersive space, that is not getting transmitted into the broader meeting. So if you're in a town hall setting where maybe you're getting a quarterly update about the organization, you're in there with your colleagues, you guys hear something that you want to talk about, you can pop over to the side, have that conversation still one-to-one while the meeting's going on, but your voice is not heard by the other people who are in that central space still, which I think is pretty neat.
That's really cool because that's definitely one of the weaknesses of Teams meetings as opposed to sitting around a table, right? Is that, in any meeting, if there's 6 of you, well, then there's going to be like 2 or 3 different conversations going on at one time. And
Yeah.
it's kind of not possible in a Teams meeting, but you're saying that with immersive space, it is possible.
Yeah, it allows that quick choice of it. I think that's probably the big difference between, say, a breakout room in Teams versus having to go into your own meeting, or now you're maybe IMing people in the background. It allows you to just step out for a moment in time, have that question, ask that colleague that clarifying piece that you needed to hear quickly in voice, and then pop back into the general meeting. All by,
Right.
in the case of using the Meta like I've done, just simply with the joystick, you can teleport into that location again and go back to watching the view screen.
Very cool. I haven't tried that. And you're saying you have tried that. You have
Yeah.
tried it and
Yep. both in the Teams client natively on the PC. So again, if you don't have a VR headset, not a problem. You can still interact with mouse and keyboard. And then, of course, interact better if you do have that. And I've done both.
Very cool. What are some of your other favorite Microsoft Teams features that you don't think people are taking advantage of?
This, I think there's a couple features. Some of it's older, but I do find that a lot of my clients are not aware of this. And I'll teach it as maybe a cautionary tale for the organization, as well as, a feature that I believe people should use. So a long time ago, at this point now, was working with the Modern Office team and Teams, as that was a little bit of a newer product at that time. So, I mean, it's been out a couple years. And we were having conversations around struggles that Microsoft was having with Teams. They are a dog food company. So whenever they generate something, you can release it out to the public. They're wave zero. They test everything first. That was a big push by Satya, was to make sure that the organization could stand their own changes. You got to love what you did. It needs to work so well, you're willing to use it. Well, with Teams, they were finding, okay, we have an issue where everybody is making new Teams channels all the time. And so we have hundreds of thousands of Teams channels. So you think of an organization their size, and you gave everybody the ability to just make what they needed. Well, they weren't really concerned about, how many Teams channels they had necessarily from a capacity number. They were more concerned about abandoned ones. What happens when they needed it for a short period of time? I mean, I've seen people do stuff for fantasy football, and then it's still sitting there from 2020, where they were doing kind of an office collaboration. That's where they did it. And then the football league's over and it's left behind. So I would say a little bit of a less used feature is there's actually a way to set timers on those so they self-expire and clean up. And why this is important, in my opinion, is because it helps prevent shadow IT. If your employees are unable to do what is necessary to get their jobs done, they need a space to collaborate. They need somewhere to drop documents so that they can, discuss a project or something along those lines, right? These are common things that I deal with, but I see all sorts of use cases between all the various different customer types that we have in the financial and healthcare and all the other businesses. And when you don't allow them to do their jobs easily enough, they'll go around it. They'll use Slack, they'll use Dropbox, they'll use other tools in order to get their jobs done. Because if they want to go ahead and drop this file somewhere and they don't have the ability to do that inside of Teams easily enough, then it's gone. And so Microsoft's cautionary tale was, let some of the cleanup tools help out with that. You can say that all Teams channels have to be renewed every 6 months or a year, which means that the Teams channel owner gets a notice and says, hey, you got to renew this, or we're going to delete your stuff. You push a button and it's good for another 6 months or another year. Or you can have ones that are indefinite. So if you have a company-wide Teams channel where you leave your employee handbook and your onboarding documentation, the one channel that everybody gets when they first started Emergent Software, here's your channel. This is where this information is. Well, there's no time limit on that one. We need that one. And so, but maybe these other ones will do a project for 6 months or a year or something along those lines. Yeah, I want this to get cleaned up after some time. We don't need this hanging out here forever. And so then it's a good opportunity to do that. So that's one thing that it's a little bit older that I think people aren't using as much. I have another one if you'd like to hear some additional pieces.
Yeah, please. I can't tell you how cluttered my workspace gets with so many channels. So having them auto delete, because you're right. Sometimes a project manager will create a new channel for just a new product, for a new project, and then, it only took 2 months, but now it's just there and I can't delete it. And the person who created it doesn't care. So,
Right.
That would be really cool.
Yeah, that auto cleanup is a big piece, and having the ability for people to go through and hide their channels and do some other little bit, because you can, for example, I'm part of certain projects where the development team is very active, communicating quite a lot, either with the customer or with each other, but I'm not there very often. So I can go through and actually change the notifications to say only when I got an @ symbol, right? When they've tagged me specifically in a post, does it bring it to my attention? So there's some ways to kind of go through and cut that out to start. We have a lot of projects. That's how we manage all of our projects through Teams channels. But there is some hygiene to be taught to people that if there's already potentially an appropriate channel made, perhaps what you need is just another Teams team. Don't make another channel. And so there's some coaching that can be done. And for organizations who want to say, we're still not going to let people make whatever they want, I can meet you halfway and say there is also an ability to force naming conventions where when you go to make one, it'll actually put your department's title into the Teams channel itself. So then there can be clear delineation on who owns what, as an example. There's a lot of features there that can be done. And this is where we have conversations with our customers just to say, make your lives easier by preventing shadow IT. At least you'll know where your data is, right? You don't have to be concerned about, shares out on some Dropbox that if an employee goes and takes another job somewhere, all of that breaks and we can't figure out where it went. Well,
Right.
it was in their personal Dropbox. So that was kind of a big deal. I didn't mean to get back onto that, but we see a lot of that when we're helping clean up or do deployments with customers. These are a common conversation. And then to add to that, there's two other new features. One of them is called shared channels, and it's slightly different than taking a channel that you have right now and inviting a guest into it. You actually get a lot more control over permissions. And the biggest piece, and for those who do this now, they know this heartache. If I was to share a channel with Microsoft, let's say we're collaborating, and I set up a shared channel with them, I would have to traditionally in the past go up to the top there and click on Emergent. And I would have to switch over to Microsoft in order to go to the channel that was shared and interact with the files. Now I don't have to do that through shared channels. It allows us to keep that integrity of like our security policies and data in place. But then it makes it easy where when I want to go into that collaborative space with a client, either they or I am not having to switch directories, which means I'll still get phone calls. I'll still get Teams messages. I'll be more aware of what's going on there, which I think is been out for a little bit, sometime in the last year or so. Fantastic feature, and I don't think a lot of people know about it. But that saves a lot of time and headache.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like so often that when I get put into a new role, like let's say I started a new company, right? And they have new tools. Well, you're also being onboarded and you're also doing all this other stuff. And then you have a job to do. So you don't actually ever really explore like the program as well as you should in order to really get the fruits of it. One of my favorite places I worked at a digital marketing agency early in my career. And we actually had a guy who his only role was to manage our project management system. It's all he did.
Mm-hmm.
And it was phenomenal. And then he basically was not the babysitter, but he hounded people to use it correctly. And if they didn't know, he trained them, right? And I've never been so organized. It was great. And I haven't had that since. And I have to project manage it myself, or, I let the program do the best it can, right? Is that the kind of thing Emergent Software offers? Like, what's your favorite way to really get into the meat of the software you're using and really get the most out of it?
I think that's pretty common across the board. Depending on the size of your organization, you'll be in a position where if it's a smaller group, what you have is you have the reluctant admin, the person who was the most tech savvy that was on staff who could handle taking care of, provisioning accounts and making sure there's licensing and doing what they can, but that's not what they do day to day. That's not their job day to day. So
right.
Oftentimes they're falling into just finding features. They didn't know it was there. They're not watching announcements and things. On the other side of it though, too, of course, even in just large organizations that have dedicated IT teams, unless you have somebody whose job is very specifically to do that app like you described, that still kind of falls behind. And so there's a couple things that I recommend. First off, that is something I commonly have conversations with the customers about. Part of our relationship with our clients is to make sure that we understand their business, understand how they work with their software, with their people, how they do their business, what's their day in the life like. And we do that on purpose so that way, as I'm seeing announcements come by, I can keep them in mind going, hey, I think you really should be taking a look at this feature, and taking a few seconds to just bring that up to them, however we've done it through status calls or meeting updates or emails or an IM or something along those lines. But for the other organizations who don't have an Emergent to assist them through these types of things, there is in admin.microsoft.com where you're going to go and do your traditional Office 365 management. If you go into the health section and look for the option called Message Center, Message Center is an update from Microsoft across all of their applications. You're talking Microsoft Teams and Stream, and you're talking about SharePoint and Exchange Online and all the rest of the various different softwares they do. And in the Message Center, they will talk about, there might be some impacts in there saying, hey, we're going to be doing maintenance on this particular platform and reporting won't be available for a short time or something along those lines. But more explicitly, and especially because Teams is such a heavily invested platform by Microsoft, you're going to find in there new features. And you'll see it says new feature is one of the tags. And there is a whole gob of new features, especially coming off of all the conferences between November and now. Microsoft is getting all of these new features out there. I mean, February brought just a whole heap of new updates for Microsoft Teams, including what we talked about, like the Immersive Spaces, right? That just came out. But there's updates to how they work on the phone, and there's updates to how they work on the desk phone, like my Poly, for example. And it tells you in here, admin impact, because Microsoft's entire premise for this is to be protect your experience, protect your data. So if there's a new feature that came out, oftentimes it's turned off. If you were a brand new customer today, they're going to turn that on in your tenant immediately, but they'll never turn on a feature that's going to have some sort of breaking change potentially to your organization. So I would say, take a look at that Message Center. There's stuff there all the time. Once a month, if you can't get to it, just try to get in there. You can also, for that matter, have them, and we talked about Planner integration, right? Which is a fantastic integration into Teams. You can have them send all of these updates to your planner. So you can at least just say, well, I'm eating lunch, or I got a couple, an hour, open on my calendar this day. I'm going to just take a look through there and see what's available right now. Anyway, that was kind of a long piece, but the Message Center has all the information. Work with Emergent. If we can't, that's the idea. And if you can't, you can go through there, take a look at what's kind of up and coming. It'll give you the heads up as to what to expect.
That's a good tip. And it would make sense to me to almost like put a reminder in your calendar monthly.
You want to go read about it, and who knows, maybe it's a new feature you want to turn on and go test. Give yourself a little extra time. But yeah, there's this month alone, and again, February was a big month. There's at least 20 updates to read through of various different things.
Right. And it's like, if you're not using those features, you're still paying for them. So you might as well get the most out of it.
Exactly.
Okay. So a cool feature you talked about was on a Microsoft Teams meeting with someone, they can set up profile cards. Tell us a little about profile cards and how you set those up.
Profiles in general are going to be generated from the profiles that you have in your organization. The more time your organization puts into them, the more value they're going to be. So for example, when I am speaking to somebody on one of our project teams and they're working with a particular thing that we're collaborating on, and I was thinking, I need to get time with this person a little bit later. When you're in the Teams meeting, that name card that's on the window, either it's showing their employee picture, or if they're on video, or if they don't have either, it shows their initials there. But either way, there's a name card there on the bottom. When you click on that, that's known as the profile card. And there's always some basic information in there, even in organizations that haven't done any work with it. But some of the pieces that I find the most valuable on is the hierarchy chart. So if I want to get time with this person, right, and I'm thinking, I really need to get 30 minutes with them. Who's their manager who I can talk to? Well, I can see the hierarchy chart. I know who's responsible for their time. I can go and click on that person out of the hierarchy chart, send them a Teams message quick and saying, hey, I'd really like to get time with Dave for a little bit. But when I am talking to external clients, people who I don't know, so say, Derek, you and I were collaborating on something, first time we've ever met on a call, and I want to learn a little bit more about you. I can do the same thing, and one of the buttons up there is LinkedIn. So built in directly to this is a Microsoft product now. Microsoft owns LinkedIn. They've integrated it into Teams, and that allows me to go through and see who you are. So I see Derek in there. I'm pretty sure that's you because it's from the right organization. And when I click on that, there's even a connect button there. So of course I can see a bit of a preview of your LinkedIn profile. So what's your title? What's your name? How long have you been there, sort of a thing. But then I can hit connect there without ever having to divert away from the meeting at that point in time and go make that connection. You can just get it right now. And so I find that really helpful to creating those connections with new clients, saying, hey, it just extends that it was nice to meet you to let's make this a longer term connection. I'd like to make sure that we keep in touch. And then from my perspective, I try to keep, for example, my LinkedIn up to date with information about, we were talking about what's new in Teams, right? What's new in Azure as a whole. And so maybe they would find some of my blog posts informational. So then they would, with that connection, they can kind of go through and see that and qualify that, these are things that we know what we're talking about and what we do. Or at least I can just keep in touch and say, hey, again, just talking about those new features that popped up. This came up, thought you'd think it was cool. So I love the profile cards.
Cool. And yeah, I don't use those. I need to be better at that.
Well, and I think that's a lot of people, right? And that's why we're talking about it, is just to say,
right.
And these are new features, right? So maybe at some point in time, they didn't do anything when you clicked on the name card. You never tried it again. Definitely get down there.
Exactly. Well, very cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Jeremy. I've learned a ton about Microsoft Teams. Who knew it was so powerful? Is there any last bits of advice, last feature you wanted to highlight with the audience?
All I can do is encourage people to continue to keep watching that message center for new updates. There's a lot of really great features coming out around voice isolation. They have AI dynamically cleaning up your messy backgrounds. A lot of us don't like to turn cameras on because our backgrounds are messy. Well, we're working in the living room doing whatever. This will help you with that. And for those people who don't like to turn a camera on because they're just, they're eating lunch or whatever, right? We're all busy. Use that avatar. That's new too. It's kind of fun. It will talk when you talk, and when you use a reaction like a thumbs up, it'll thumbs up. It's a nice way to just bring that hybrid presence. So watch the message centers out there, watch the emergent blogs. We're always talking about these things, and happy to have those conversations.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us, Jeremy. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Derek.